and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Knowledge Transfer and Succession Planning Strategies for Your Event Tech. My name is Alexis Gajdar. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a marketing manager here with Cadmium and thrilled to be your host and a speaker for today's webinar. We're going to dive into a couple tips for overcoming common challenges during the event tech admin knowledge transition process and how you can set up your team for success and chat about making a game plan and other key resources. One thing here at Cadmium, we always put our clients first, and we understand staff turnover is inevitable and we want to set you up for success. After doing some digging, we were curious what other current staff turnover rates are for associations. And what we found is staff turnover rates in associations can vary from year to year, of course, and influenced by other factors, including the economy, industry trends, and organizational changes. It's also important to note that turnover rates can vary significantly by position and department within an association. And so while in 2010 was a decade ago, and turnover rates may have changed since then, it's clear that staff turnover is an ongoing challenge for many associations and organizations. And anecdotally, we know this is an ongoing problem for associations. And while there are many resources online to address this challenge, today we're going to focus on how you can set up your team for smooth knowledge transfers for your event technology. All right. So I have a great group of ladies joining us today. Let me just preface that a lot of them were previous Cadmium event tech users before joining Cadmium team. And so they'll provide really great introspects and some great knowledge for us today. So I'd love to bring on Allie, I have Jennifer, I have a Carrie, and I have a Mirella. Hi, ladies, welcome. I guess starting from the top, Allie, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Alexis. So I'm Allie Navarro. My full name is actually Alicia Navarro, in case anybody has seen it that way. I am a project manager and team lead here at Cadmium. I've been with Cadmium just about 1.5 years now. And prior to that, I was a client for almost 10 years. I am a certified meeting professional, and in my heart, I will always be a meeting planner. But I love working for Cadmium as well. So, yeah.
Awesome. What about you, Jennifer?
Thanks. I'm Jennifer. I've been at Cadmium since September of last year. I was able to use the Cadmium software as a client prior to coming over to this side, and I just really liked the experience and the flexibility that it provided. And I thought it'd be really fun to work with a lot of other associations kind of as they navigate our tools. Prior to that, I was a meeting planner. I worked for a couple different medical associations over more than 8 years. So I've planned a lot of events, big and small, hybrid, in-person, you name it. So yeah, now I'm here and having a good time.
Mirella?
Thank you. My name is Mirella. As Allie and Jennifer mentioned, prior to joining Cadmium last year in November. I was a meetings manager for a nonprofit association for 10 years. I joined Cadmium and I have no regrets. I love it here.
Awesome. And last but not least, Carrie.
Hey everyone, thanks again for joining us today. My name is Carrie and I am a project manager and team lead here at Cadmium. I joined in February of 2021. And before that, I worked at NC State University as a conference manager, and I have been in the meeting and events field for over 20 years, and I absolutely love it. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you, ladies, so much for joining us today. I'm so excited for this webinar. So before we dive in, I guess, Brian, can you bring our slides back up? Thank you. For our first question for you ladies today, so how did you use Cadmium's event technology at your previous company? Did you have any event management software? Like, was there a structure or an SOP? I'm going to start with you, Carrie.
Yeah, so before joining Cadmium, when I was at NC State University, we offered two different types of programs. We had professional courses and we had conference and events. And actually, we had 2 different types of platforms for those programs, but we managed an in-person conference and we had to flip it very quickly to a virtual conference. And that was in, I think, we were looking for a software probably about March of 2020, and we had to go we had to go virtual by June, and that's when we sourced Cadmium because they had a live stream component, and we got to work with an amazing team. So that's how we ended up with Cadmium.
Okay, super cool. I love hearing that. And then Mirella, How about you?
We used Cadmium for a long time for the scorecard and event scribe. I wasn't personally using Cadmium. We were in the conference and convention division, and we planned live meetings until the pandemic started. And of course, like everybody else, we had to, and I don't like this word, but I'm going to have to use it, we had to pivot. So in a very short period of time, we had to find, just like Carrie mentioned, a way to deliver our meetings to our attendees in a different format. And Cadmium was the platform that we used because they had the live streaming, and it worked for some of our meetings, not for all. We used other platforms for the largest meeting, but so we used Cadmium. And because I was in the conference and convention division responsible for planning those live meetings, I started using Cadmium to plan the virtual meetings. So that's why I came across Cadmium, and it went great. And I think for my previous employer, it really showed that these meetings had a great success in the new format. And they've decided to just continue in the virtual world. So now Cadmium is, the way to go for these meetings.
Wow, that's awesome. It's great to hear like virtual meetings are still happening. Everyone's been like, it's dead, or it's like hybrid. Interesting. I can't wait to talk more. And Jennifer, what about you?
Yeah, in my prior organization, we used a lot of different vendors for different components. So we had a registration vendor that was totally separate from our live streaming vendor, that was totally separate from website and mobile app offerings that we could provide, and publication items we were using, and everything was just very much its own siloed piece. And we did a big audit of everything and just decided that it would be so helpful to kind of find an all-in-one option that could let us consolidate and share data between different tools, be able to like report on different things really easily, all within kind of one space. And that as a small team as well, I was part of a very small team in terms of staff. There were only so many hours in a day, and there was a lot of things to do, and trying to like make that as efficient as possible. So when we reached this audit point and kind of looked at all of the vendors that we had, and then looked out to see what else was available, this was one of the softwares that we found, and just really enjoyed the experience of being able to have so much at our fingertips under one roof. And it saved a lot of time. It's made reporting a lot easier, and also created a lot of flexibility where staff could just kind of move through the process and not have to wait for other people to sort of set things up for us.
That's awesome. And Allie, what about you?
So my story is a little different. My career kind of grew the more I used Cadmium at my organization. So I actually started as an intern, and when I came in, they were already using Cadmium, but they were solely using it for what we call on-site proceedings. So someone would come on site, record all of the proceedings, and then they would post them or send them to us after the fact. So as I kind of stayed at that position a little longer. After about a year, we picked up some more products. And right around the time I was brought on full time, we brought on the full majority of the suite of products Cadmium worked on. And it was kind of my sole responsibility to set up and work with everyone to kind of make sure it was working through properly for our needs. And, it's a good experience for users and everything. So kind of helped take it from being multiple different vendors with multiple different departments in charge of it to having it all live within our conference services department and living within Cadmium, which was a great learning experience. And at one point, we also took the submission process from 11 different entities into one single location, where all submissions, no matter who they were for, were going through a Cadmium scorecard. So it's part of that process too. So I differently learned and became the person I am today through that process, because it just was an overall experience in general, fantastic when it came to working with the team at Cadmium, but also working with my team and organization and kind of finding the solutions and working out what the best way to do the process was with the tools we had available to us. Yeah, and then when I was ready to move on to a different role as a manager, and looking for an organization to do that with, I specifically look for organizations that use the Cadmium software so I can continue that learning and continue using that product. So it's kind of really where I started. Definitely a lot more detail to that story than we have time to share, but if anyone ever wants to hear it, let me know. Yeah, it's a 10-year journey. And when I was, made, actually, I think that was the third offer I finally accepted to join Cadmium, I was happy to do so. And I'm, glad to be part of the team now.
We love our users at Cadmium. All right, my next question for you ladies. What were you doing before you had Cadmium as a tool? And did it improve any efficiencies? I will start with Jennifer.
Yeah. Cadmium made a lot of things much more efficient for us. Not only were we using different vendors that each had kind of their own reporting structures, and it was really hard to manually combine some of those pieces of data and keep track of them. We would have version after version of Excel documents, and it would get really muddy to be like, oh, one of our chairs commented on this one, but then a different volunteer commented on a different one, and making sure that nothing fell kind of through the cracks. And I think it also did a lot to help us be better stewards of some sensitive data. Like abstract submissions are typically confidential and could be like some really exciting and groundbreaking research, and being able to use a really organized system that gave us flexibility for blinded reviews and all kinds of tools to be respectful of the data that was being entrusted with us and make sure that we were like handling it in a sensitive way that really promoted the organization's missions and values, was a big component of it too. And so we went from, I think we really scaled down kind of the margin with which human error could even take place, which was great, and made things a lot easier to keep track of. And then also in terms of being able to use the software and leverage it kind of year over year without having to reinvent every time. That was hugely helpful from a like staff time management perspective too.
Yeah, I kept thinking of that idiom, and it was like a rising tide lifts all boats. It was just like, anyway, that's awesome.
Yeah, it definitely created, I think it was a better experience all around, from like a staff user experience and like Cadmium admin user experience to the experience of our speakers, submitting their slides, accepting invitations, managing their travel and stuff, and then also our submitters entering in their research. Just across the board, I think it made a lot more sense.
That's awesome. I'm going to go to Mirella next. What were you using before Cadmium, or did you have anything before you were using Cadmium?
So for the meetings, we didn't use anything. We had the live meetings. And, one of the reason we do meetings is because people are social creatures. So they need to interact and network and meet. And but we've noticed that especially when one of our meetings, a smaller meeting, about 500 to 600 people, we had less and less attendees participating in this networking function. So they were there for the educational content, not necessarily to interact. These people didn't know each other, didn't have any desire to get to know each other and to network. Mm-hmm. So when we had to switch from a live meeting to a virtual meeting, we noticed that attendance increased. And we took this meeting virtually for about 3 years, I would say. 2 years. 2 years virtual, and then last year, while I was still with my previous employer, we had a live meeting, and the attendance dropped. So we did this experiment, I would say. And senior leadership concluded that this particular meeting will do much better in a virtual world than in a live format. So because of that, the decision was made to completely change the format and take this meeting moving forward virtually, because it worked so much better for this specific attendance. And Cadmium was selected to be the platform for this meeting. So I think had we not used Cadmium in 2020 and 2021, I don't think we would have seen this difference.
Yeah.
So that was the impact. Before using Cadmium, we had completely live meetings. With the pandemic, we switched virtual, and now as a result of that, we continue using Cadmium for virtual meeting.
Got it. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Ali, what about you? I know you said you came in, they were already using Cadmium, but then they started getting more modules. Like, did you see any impact on getting more modules with your Cadmium solution?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest ones is because it is an all-in-one kind of a product. One of the biggest issues that at least I saw, and I don't think everybody else really kind of noticed, is that every single division, because it was a pretty large association, 11 larger divisions, and then about 25 more smaller groups below that. They were all very siloed when it came to the education and understanding like who was providing the content, what was the content about, is anybody overlapping, and having those discussions. So one of the things that we first did was we did, bring everybody together for that submission process and say, okay, like, what are the commonalities that we have? What can we do as a single, group of questions? And then what are the differences and how we can add those and to make it a process that works for everyone, but is together, that we're not in our own little groups, in our own little worlds, and we're not really kind of finding ways to share that data. But then once we had that product and we have a single location where that lives, made it much easier to feed out to things like a website, which is a mobile app. Whereas before we were depending on other departments. IT had one piece, meetings had another piece, and membership had a third piece, and just kind of working that all into one single place where we could all share that detail, share the information, integrate together, versus being in, our own little sections of the world. And I think it made it a better process for us, but it also made a better experience for our attendees. So that was a big piece of it there. And then my most recent association, I definitely have to agree with Mirella. We tried going virtual on our own, and although it was successful, using a product and selecting, because we did go through a selection process, selecting Cadmium for that virtual piece was huge time saver for all of us. But we saw the numbers, and we saw how, we were reaching out an audience outside of what we normally had attending our live meetings that couldn't attend live, were joining us and participating virtually. So it definitely, Cadmium definitely helped with creating those opportunities on both ends of the spectrum, and just kind of made life easier and more fun for everybody.
That's awesome. Carrie, what about you?
Well, I have a much more simpler response to that, because I didn't stay with NC State long after using Cadmium. So the impact that it had on me was now that I work for Cadmium. So that's a huge work impact. So I'm very happy. So thanks.
Yeah, and I don't know if you mentioned it earlier, you guys chose Cadmium because it was going virtual, right?
Yes, we did. Yep.
That's awesome. Okay, cool. Thank you, Liz.
I think, Alexis, apologies for interrupting. Yeah, I think the impact was the same for all of us. Look at us now, like being with Cadmium after, being users. So that was
huge.
That was
a huge impact.
Yeah.
Like I said, we love our users here at Cadmium. All right. Question number 3. If we could bring that slide up, Brian. Tips for how to set up your Cadmium user for success. I'm going to start with Ali. Do you have a tip or anything you want to give our audience?
I always like to say introduction and questions. So introduce your users to your project manager. Take that time to set up that call, set up that meeting, have that conversation, and then be open to asking all of the questions. Don't feel like you're alone out there. You're not. We're here. We'll answer questions. We'll help you find solutions. I think that is, for me, my favorite thing when a client comes up and asks a question. And like, well, I hate to ask. No, don't ask. Go ahead and ask all of the questions. It makes me so much happier when you're asking and looking for a solution. So yeah, that would be my biggest tip.
Mirella, what about you? How would you set a Cadmium user up for success?
I think, and it happened last week, and I think it's so relevant. Do not be afraid to set up a kickoff call, even though you're well versed in Cadmium as a client. You've used Cadmium for so many months, years. You never know what piece of information you're going to find out during a kickoff call that could help for the future. So do not be afraid to schedule a kickoff call.
Okay. And Carrie, what about you?
I think just to play on what Ali was saying too, don't be afraid to ask questions. Just, you have the chance to use the boomerangs, just send those boomerangs in. And I think we kind of drive this home with our clients, is that not only are project managers looking out for those boomerangs, but we have a whole team of our product specialists looking for your questions too. So we have a whole staff that's got their eyes peeled open for the boomerangs and the questions, and we are more than happy to answer that. So don't ever sit there wondering, just submit a boomerang and ask your question. We're here to help you.
Okay. Finally, Jennifer, what about you? Any tips?
Yeah. I think one that I really like is I always start with the missions anytime I start a new module or begin working on a new event. I find, especially thinking about the topic of this webinar and being like knowledge transfer and accounting for turnover, especially if you've done events with Cadmium before, you can still go back to those events and view data from those missions, and they might help answer some questions or indicate some data decisions that you might need in the future. They're a nice kind of historical context of some of that basic event information that might have taken place last year or prior. I also really enjoy missions because they're kind of the same starting point across all of the modules. So they're always going to collect some of that initial event information so that we understand some of the timelines and dates around your event, what you might need, approximately how big it is, what your initial questions are. And then, as Mirella mentioned too, in that Get Started mission, you can request a kickoff call. I think that's always a good thing to do as well. Gives you a chance to touch base with your project manager, make sure that anything that's new and different from prior years is accounted for. Also gives you a chance to send us some initial questions. And also the missions might ask you some things that might not be front of mind, but might be really important later on in the process. So I think those are a really good kind of home base for me to learn a lot about my clients and their particular event and how they plan to use the module.
Very in-depth. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and Alexis, I wanted to add too about, we're kind of driving home the point about the kickoff calls, is that, this is an opportunity for your project manager, if it hasn't been stated, to say if there's anything new within the module, your project manager can reinforce that. And then it's a great chance for your project manager to remind you as the user about the client-facing validator, and also just reminding you to also do the pre-launch prep missions. That's a mouthful, but within there you can request a quality check, and that sends home just allows you as the client to have your module get a quality check too. So again, we're kind of driving home that don't skip kickoff calls, but I know a lot of clients, you might have like 8 or 6 projects a year, but just come visit us twice a year or something like that. Just always check in with us. We love to see our clients.
Yeah, and just sorry, I'm going to jump into. I know we have a lot of super users out there. I know some of us on the call have been super users or have had that label. And I think just to both everyone's point, honestly, is, take the time to talk to us, but also don't be afraid to ask us how other clients are doing things too. Everybody uses our product in so many different ways. I just had this conversation last week with 2 different clients. I was on site for 2 different clients to do support. And they both asked me, is there a better way to do this? How are other people doing this? Don't be afraid to ask us that, because we have examples, we have suggestions, we have ways to kind of maybe improve something that you've been doing the same way for the last 5 years. And just kind of like take a minute and let me show you what somebody else's app could, what your app could do based on someone else's, or what is a different way that we're doing, posters, or, just anything. Just ask us if there's something that is a pain point for you. We might have an opportunity to help improve it for you.
Yeah.
And sorry, Alexis, to piggyback on Ali's super user, yes, some clients have this super user who knows Cadmium very well, but one piece of advice I have is, because I've seen this throughout my career, do not put all your eggs in one basket. Meaning, do not just have one person who is working in Cadmium, taking care of everything Cadmium, because what are you going to do if this person leaves tomorrow? Make sure that you cross-train a team of users who can jump in and support each other if needed. And on that same note, make sure you have SOPs, standard operating procedures, on not necessarily on how to use Cadmium, because Cadmium has a number of training materials for our users out there. I'm sure they know, the question marks, the help tips in the bottom of the page. They can always refer that. We have a number of training materials, but how you as a user do certain things. Just like Ali said, all our clients are using Cadmium in different ways. This is what you need to put down on a SOP and how exactly you do certain things. And share that with a new hire. I was inside a couple of weeks ago, and one of the clients that I'm working with was pretty new. And knowing we're going to have this webinar, I asked her what her onboarding process was. And she basically told me that she had to learn Cadmium on her own. She had a little bit of support from her team, but it was mostly by herself. And again, Cadmium has all the support you need, but we're not going to be able to tell you how you as a client are doing, are using our product. So create these documents, have them available, revise them twice a year, or every time there's a change in your company, or every time there's a change in Cadmium. Make sure you have these documents updated.
Yeah.
And that was
I think when someone asked a question, and I think it's kind of relevant for right now, is if someone wanted to train a team member on Cadmium's event tech, like, who should they reach out to? Is it their account manager or the project manager? They know the project managers are very busy, so they just wanted to confirm. Who wanted to take that? Yeah, Ali.
Okay, I was going to say, submit a boomerang. Honestly, there is a meeting request boomerang. If you send that out to us and you say, hey, I have a new team member, I want to set up a meeting, the meeting boomerang, so we can introduce you to them and then talk about training. That's probably the first step you want to do, is just go ahead and do that. It will be mostly a pleasure for them to jump in and meet us. And then we'll kind of go through the list of, the information, and we can set up that training. If it's an opportunity for an onboard training, we can get that scheduled as well with our if anybody has met Bob is fantastic. He does our onboard training for all of our new clients. We can have that set up as well. But it's a good opportunity to just meet face to face over video, and really have an opportunity to talk and get that ball rolling and get it all set up.
Yeah. Okay, and I guess this might be something later, but someone also asked, is there a checklist or for churn or turnover to-dos when someone is learning cadmium products? And I guess I'll answer that. We are creating a checklist SOP for you all. And so you'll receive that in the recording once that's available to get that into your inbox. So definitely look out for that. Okay, we're going to keep going on our slides here. Bring them back up. I think we have Jennifer's knowledge transfer tips for Cadmium's Ventec. Jennifer, I'll hand it over.
Yeah, thanks. So we all put together kind of a couple things that we recommend and just are available in thinking about staff turnover. It's always hard. I feel like in this industry, turnover never comes at a good time. Like there's no time to transition. So you're just trying to fly by the seat of your pants as best you can. For me, some things that I really stand by are trying to document as much as you can. Mirella was just talking about having SOPs and timelines and things like that. Any sort of like internal resource documents that you can create to hand off to a successor. It's never going to hurt. I think it always provides a little more context, a little historical information that can be helpful. Hand in hand with that, if it's possible to keep somebody's email accessible to other staff so that you can go in and like keyword search maybe a specific session title or a specific speaker or a keynote to figure out kind of what was the process for reaching a decision about planning this part of your program. Having access to old emails can be really helpful. The Cadmium system itself also gives you access to prior boomerangs that might have been handled and submitted and closed out by prior staff members. So if you use that focus in the boomerang tool, you can focus to completed boomerangs and see kind of historical conversations between your other staff members and Cadmium project managers about issues or hurdles that came up throughout the process and were resolved. I also really like that Cadmium allows you to copy settings and tasks from one year to the next for most of our modules. I know as a client that saved me a ton of time of not having to like recreate those every year, and then it would get me sort of 80% of the way and I could just go in and update the instructions and the dates, add in anything new, kind of do my testing and be on my way. And then even as a project manager, I look at help tips and some of our other training resources all the time. There's so many features and so many settings across all of our modules that it's a lot to keep track of. And a lot of it does become second nature, but especially when I'm working on new things or needing to make adjustments to accommodate changes in events year over year, the help tips can be really useful references as I'm working in my events.
Awesome. Thank you. Loving this GIF, or meme rather. Thank you. Next, I'll hand it over to Mirella. And you kind of touched on this earlier, but if you wanted to go in more detail or give more background into why you should put all your eggs in the basket.
I did. I heard this expression a few years ago, and when I heard it, I couldn't understand why, but it makes sense. So during my 10 years with my previous employer, I've experienced one of the staff members retiring, and after she retired, the team realized that nobody knew how to do what she was doing because nothing was documented. There was no SOPs, and she was doing what she was doing for so many years that nobody questioned what she was doing and how she was doing it. So when she left the company, the team was put in a situation where they had to scramble and gather information and learn how to do that process. And that's what I'm trying to say is learning Cadmium, yes, it's something new, it's something extra. It takes a little bit of time, but it's worth it. It's worth it to have a team who works in Cadmium because you never know, life happens, and you never know when one of the team members leaves, and you need to be in a situation where you can continue smoothly with your processes instead of panicking and wasting time on, trying to learn Cadmium really fast. So that's my 2 cents for, the tip. And as I mentioned, that SOPs, yes, create them exactly how your processes are, updated as often as necessary. And when you have a new hire, you can provide those documents to the new hire so they can learn your processes. And I think you're going to be set for success.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Marilla, for giving us more details there. And then I'm going to hand it over to Carrie and Allie's tips for working with your Cadmium event tech team. I think Allie, you'll kick us off there here.
Yeah, I think it's great that Carrie and I are doing this slide together, because the only difference between the two of us and the other amazing ladies on this call is that we're also team leads. So we lead a team of ops, a combination of project managers and product specialists. They're all fantastic. You will hear me say that many times. I truly believe that our teams are amazing and they do great work. But yes, very first bullet on this list, I say over and over again, is send a boomerang. Boomerangs for requesting meetings, boomerangs in general. It's the easiest way to get in touch with us. And if we're just happen to be out of the office one day, just getting in touch with the team in general. Boomerangs for us, I know not everybody likes them and find them, annoying sometimes, but it's really the best way to reach out to your team members. Requesting meetings specifically gives us an opportunity to get a couple of dates and times when you're available, but also we ask you to provide, what specifically do you want to talk about? Is it a technical issue? Is it just an overall general, question that you have for us? So really use those boomerangs to the best of the best of your ability to really kind of share information with us. And Carrie, I think you had something to add to that, right?
Oh, yeah. So definitely, I think one thing I've learned over time, Allie, you hit on requesting, a meeting with your project manager. Just keep in mind, to all of our users out there, project managers are usually the ones that are helping you with your timeline, consulting on the product. But if you have very specific questions that you need answered in that meeting, go ahead and send those ahead of time. Just spell out exactly what you need help with, because if it's really technical, we can have one of our product specialists join us on those calls to really help you and dive into what you're trying to accomplish. So definitely, when you request those meetings, shoot those questions over. It will be a big help for us.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies. And our last and final question. One thing you know now as a Cadmium team member that you wish you knew then as a client. I'm going to start with Carrie.
Yeah, well, I guess for me, and maybe some of you super users out there know this, but maybe for the users that are just beginning, in our modules, we have where you can add a sandbox. And if you don't know what a sandbox is just a test event. So this is a really good opportunity for your new users, your newer employees coming in. So you super users, add a sandbox for them and let them have fun in those sandboxes. Let them, play around, add presentations, add, anything they want, so they start to get a feel of how the system is. So, and I wasn't a user for a very long time in the system, but I do wish I knew about sandboxes beforehand. So I highly recommend adding test events for your users to play around with.
Cool. I guess, Mirella, what about you? One thing you know now that you wish you knew then?
It kind of goes with the sandbox that Carrie mentioned. I was not aware on how much training material Cadmium has available for its users. Everywhere you look, on every single page, you will find some tips. On the home page, once you log in, on the top, you will have a training section, and it has all the modules, videos, and PDFs that you can print and look at. I didn't know about all that. But now I know, and I share it with my clients every call I have, and they appreciate it.
Yeah, this help tips or tipsy tips like everywhere. It's wild. Jennifer, what about you? What's one thing you know now you wish you knew then?
Yeah, I think as a client working with my project managers, I was able to make some adjustments to like timelines and procedures with their input on how long it usually takes for certain things to happen. I learned that, for example, like migrations can happen really quickly, or if you have a really customized setup, you might need to build in a couple of days for that to take place and be able to check your data and make sure that everything looks good. So I think I added a couple extra days within my timeline to kind of build out some of that time. But also learning from my project manager, like how fast other places or other tasks could be to really make up for that time. So in general, it helped things be a little bit less stressful. I kind of knew what my roadmap was and where I was going. I knew the order of operations of kind of what had to come first, ABC, and then being able to tweak that year over year to really make it work for me.
Got it. So definitely leaning on your project manager when you can. I feel that. Allie, what about you? What's your tip or your thing you know now you wish you knew then?
Yeah, so my answer is always a little more mushy than everybody else's, but I have to agree with everybody else. It's really has to do with, being a meeting planner, being in the meetings industry. It's one of the top 5 most stressful careers you can possibly select in the U.S. It's stressful, and it can be stressful, 2 weeks out to your event. I think my tip is, along with leaning on your project managers, looking at how you can improve your timelines, looking for all of that, what everybody else has already says, is just go easy on yourself. Take a minute to step back, take a deep breath, look at what you've accomplished already, and ask for help when you need it. It's just, you'd say, you know what, I'm 2 weeks out. Allie, I know this isn't normal, but is there anything that you guys can do to help? And we might be able to, we might have an answer out there. So being open to looking at what you have going on, taking a minute and asking for help is really something I wish I had done more when I was a client. I didn't do it enough, and that's my tip.
I definitely hear you ladies saying like send boomerangs and everything. If someone were to send an email, do you encourage that? Do you discourage that and would rather them send a boomerang for anything urgent?
I can go if you.
Okay.
Most likely, we would take your email and put it in a boomerang. So, yeah, I mean, it's just something that we, encourage all of our users is to submit boomerangs.
Yeah. And I think Allie was mentioning not everybody is fond of boomerangs. I wasn't when I was a client. I didn't understand why I need to add it one more thing to my why can we all work with emails? But now being on the other side, I know, I understand.
Love authenticity. Thank you.
Yeah. With all honesty, we have, the product page open, my Cadmium. There's so much going on that maybe email is not the one thing on that I necessarily look at all the time. So if you send an email, I might not see it right away. And 2, I think somebody else had mentioned, I might be out of the office and I don't see it until, 2-3 days after. But when you send the boomerang, the boomerangs are viewed by the entire team. It's not just even though my name is on a boomerang, they will not just come to me. And I see that right away. And also, if I'm out of the office, my team will see it and they will respond to it. So more chances to receive a response when you send the boomerang than when you send an email.
Got it. We have a audience question I thought was interesting, kind of like the whole theme. We didn't answer it, I think. What steps did each of the panelists put in place to transfer their Cadmium knowledge before they left their prior employers? And was there something they wish they had done but didn't? Anyone wants to
I can go.
Okay, Jennifer.
I was in a really fortunate position to do some onboarding with a person that would ultimately take over several components of my role. So we got to do a lot of cross training where I took her through the modules that I had already worked in. I took her through the timeline in terms of like where all of our programs were right now and where were they going to need to go in the next like 1, 2, or 3 months. We got a lot of hands-on time in terms of being able to look specifically at our events and the configuration that we used in Cadmium for them, which was really great and I recognize is not always available. In the event we hadn't had that time, I was trying to like document a lot of things and kind of spell out, this is what I'm doing 12 months out. This is what I'm doing 11 months out, 10, 9, 8, etc. Kind of all the way through. And trying to make sure that other team members also kind of knew where things stood so that it wasn't just this one new person who was coming in fresh, being like the sole contact and point of reference for different things. So it's a growing process. I think it does take time. I think being in this industry is pretty steep onboarding processes, kind of no matter what you're doing. But I do think as well, having consistent project managers where the new staff person could meet with somebody that had already worked with my organization in the past. My project manager also had a frame of reference of kind of how things were set up. And so they had some knowledge and historical context and were able to kind of guide this person to get up to speed and also feel really comfortable.
Okay. Umbrella, Allie, did you guys have anything in place?
When I left the company, there was nobody to replace me at the moment. They hired somebody later, so I didn't necessarily do onboarding with the new person. But in my division, we were fortunate enough to cross-train. So I wasn't the only one who knew how to do a certain meeting. There was always somebody who shadowed or somebody who did the meeting before me. So we had that shared knowledge. And on top of that, that's why I'm so, mentioning these SOPs all the time. We had the SOPs in place, and there was open communication between the team members on where I was with certain projects and what was coming next. And so I think that was very helpful, even though there was nobody new to take on my responsibilities, but the rest of the team had an idea of where I was with the project.
Natalie, what about you? You came in and they already had Cadmium, and you learned that they had Cadmium. Did they have anything in place for you?
At my last position, yeah, there was definitely a better understanding. So I don't have much to add on to that one. But my first position when I worked with Cadmium, I wish I had more time to kind of transition all that information over before I left. There definitely wasn't anyone interested in taking on the role. There was no one hired. I don't think they ever did hire anyone for that specific role. So the transition itself was really difficult. I did my best to complete anything that was kind of outstanding and left my SOPs that were completed and guidebooks and everything. But I definitely wish there had been more time to really kind of find someone to take on the responsibility, or at least, divide the responsibility out across members. That was a hard leave for me. It was time, it was needed, but I left wishing I had done more to help, the next person take over and understand it better.
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes they say 2 weeks notice is like not long enough, or it's like two is just right. Who knows? One other question we got in the audience. Do any of you ladies have advice or tips for approaching leadership to purchase a new event technology? Have any of you ever been in this kind of situation when looking for anything?
I was going to say, and I think I saw there was a university person on here. When we went to go purchase cadmium, I would just say, give yourself extra time. There was the process to send this contract through a university. It did take a while. For us, it was a great fit with the technology that we needed and the price point. But the one thing I just wish I knew ahead of time was sending contracts through university takes a little bit longer. So I would give that tip there.
The bureaucracy, I get it.
Yes.
Anyone else have any tips?
I would say the same thing. No matter university or a different association, yes, give yourself extra time. We personally, I didn't have to go to the senior leadership team to convince them, but I was part of the team that put together the proposal to show that it makes sense to go with cadmium for this meeting. But yes, I mean, show the advantages, and I think one of the advantage was financial. It made more sense to have go with a virtual meeting than we didn't have to pay for hotels and food and beverage and transportation, and also was a win for the attendees. The same thing, they didn't have to travel to the meeting, they didn't have to book a hotel room. So showing the advantages of going with cadmium, choosing to pay for a scorecard or for a harvester or for a website, for an app, it definitely makes your life as a client easier. And it's also makes the attendees' life easier. I think I mentioned this, I was on site 2 weeks ago for badging, and I couldn't believe, for me, badging wasn't something new, but I couldn't believe the feedback that I heard, the positive feedback I heard from the attendees. This is so much better. This is so much easier. It goes so much faster. When you hear things like that, how can you not pay for something that makes your life easier?
Yeah.
That would be my argument. And if you need more than that to, convince senior leadership that it's worth it, then I don't know what else you could do.
Yeah. What about you, Allie?
So for me, it definitely was understanding what your wants are and what your needs are, and not just your own, but every single stakeholder involved. Like, talk to that senior leadership and say, like, if you were an attendee to a conference, what is something that you absolutely need, versus what is, would be nice, but we don't necessarily need to have that. And knowing that going into it, so that you're looking for those items while you're going through the process. But also a note that I got from Jen, as well as I think we can all agree with this: understand the leadership, what they're looking for, speak their language, look at what the cost is versus the value, and really kind of get that all in one package and present that to them, so that they have all of the information they need up front and in front of them. But yeah, so sorry, I'm reading something. Yeah, and then understand where the cost savings come from. I know, and I have to agree with this point too. When you look at it as overall, like, are you saving more money going with cadmium without having to pay for any additional extras that are going to come up later? Or are you, losing on a service or a value because you're paying less somewhere else? So really kind of thinking that about that as well, and having that understood and upfront when you're presenting it to senior leadership.
I also think, just one more thing to add is, I think having an efficient system that is like flexible and customizable and gives you as the employee or the team a lot of tools at your fingertips. It helps you manage your time better, which then makes your job easier, which then allows your organization to maybe branch in and do cool new things that you haven't had the bandwidth for. Being able to copy settings year over year may allow you to have a new webinar that you've always wanted to do because the president has wanted to push a certain initiative, and it just, you know, continues to get lost within the rest of the higher priority stuff. So I think there's also an ability in leveraging event tech software that gives you the ability to do more as an organization and expand that member engagement and member return. That also plays into like the business side of an association too.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for your insight and your tips and advice today. And